traditions have deep grammar. And there's an example that I use from my own experience very often, I'll use it again here, is my own interaction with one form called Kuthu. It's called Katte Kuthu by some, Terukuthu by some, and that's a political argument on which should be used. And I was watching this one day by a very senior artist, and I didn't understand head or tail of what was going on. Okay? It all looked the same. 45 minutes of the same, going around, and somebody playing the mridangam, everybody running around. I knew it was a Mahabharata story, so I kind of vaguely knew the characters. After about 45 minutes, there was this question and answer session, and this gentleman very casually mentioned that there were 68 or 60 forms of Adavis. Adavis, for those who don't know, are leg movements, or leg positions, kind of leg movements. And that kind of blew me away. Because my problem there was my arrogance. I was like, how come I never noticed even two? To me, they all look the same. I watched Bharatanatyam all my life. I know Carnatic music, come on. And this man tells me there is 60 Adavas, and that kind of shook me up. First, it broke down the notion that there was no complexity. There's great complexity. That there is no structure. There is structure. That there is no technique. There is technique. There is no history. There is history because it's passed down traditionally. Okay, so all this, so there is a teaching methodology. There has to be a teaching methodology if it's carried on. So all these are technical ideas, but they are also cultural ideas. Okay, and that kind of blew me away that moment. I was completely stunned by it, more about my ignorance than anything else. And the whole idea of theorization, it's very interesting that in India, we have come to a point where we believe theorization should be written down. This is a culture where most theorization was never written down. It was post facto documented by somebody. So theorization, first of all, is an interesting thought. It actually observes happening. Theorization does not usually come before happening. So what theorization actually does, it's an act of observation. So you observe, all of you are pretty much doing that in your field. You observe phenomena and you theorize phenomena. It's true of science, it's true of social science, it's true of everything. So this is what the only difference in India is most of it many times have not been written down. Now who writes down? People who are educated. Who are educated? The guys who are at the top of the ladder. So therefore, theorization has been written down only in traditions that have, like the two gentlemen so beautifully said, patronage and support from the higher positions in society, because they are the ones who have had access to write it down and the education to put it in word. This does not mean that theorization does not exist down the caste ladder or the social ladder. There's theorization. You watch Theyyam. One of the speakers are going to talk about Theyyam. You want to understand what's going on. The person within the culture will know every movement. So we need to step back from that word. I personally dissociated myself from the word classical, because I think that it is not a term that describes art at all. It only describes me. It basically describes who I am, and it describes who you are. So in a way, it defines your position in society rather than the art form. And folk is also problematic. What I would prefer to use is, if you want to use this term, especially, for example, lullabies, harvest songs. I know that they're going to come in. Harvest songs, these things, suppose we call it social music. Okay? These forms are not being theorized or not being documented in that sense, but they are part of a certain event-related culture. So when an event happens, they sing these songs. So this is social music, and I would, if you want to use folk, I would say use folk only to define social music. Other thing, folk is not determined by the urban-rural divide. Folk is also an urban reality. This kind of folk, here I'm using folk specifically in a social sense, is also an urban reality. Okay? This is true of all cultures. As much in the Brahmin household as in the Dalit household, there are lullabies that have come through the parents. There are certain songs that are sung during certain events. So there is social music like this beyond the rural and urban divide. So I would rather use the word social music than folk, because folk traps you into other problems. And I think it's better we kind of remove ourselves from the classical and the folk duality. This duality is not really right.
Would pop be a part of folk?
I'm going to talk about that too. I want to do that after the break. I'm going to come to that. What time is the break? 3, is it? Okay, I'm just going, yeah, it's perfect. So there is the word aesthetics, which is what I'm going to address next, in aesthetics and beauty. And I think I'm going to go into the aspect of intentionality. Like I said, it's diverse, and that makes it fascinating. What I think we all should recognize is that every art form, I'll come to you, every art form in a way addresses different emotional needs of the human being. Because of the diversity of the way we receive and we share, every art form, that's I think the magnificence of art. And art is a human creation. You know, how many of you disagree with me that art is a human creation? I made a statement and I thought people will argue it. You disagree with me. Okay. Tell me why you disagree with me.
Even hillock can have an art form by itself.
Mm-hmm.
Hillock.
A hillock. Anybody's going to add, or should I can respond to him?
Actually, how the river flows itself. If you observe that, you can find what you otherwise have the other visual arts.
Okay, my only point to you is this. Who decided it was art?
No, what I mean...
No, I agree with you. But only point to you is this.
No, what I mean...
You observed the river,
Yeah.
you observed the hillock, and you decided it was art. Correct?
Yeah.
You can't argue that.
Yeah.
That functionally says that the man has created the idea of art and is observing the idea of art in everything that surrounds him. So the hillock by itself is not art if you didn't exist.
Yeah.
If you didn't observe it and say it was art, the same thing about the bird song. I will give you an example of the bird song.
A shank, for instance.
Now the bird song, who decided it was a song? You and I. Why? Because we constructed sounds in a certain pattern and decided it was beautiful. And if the bird's sounds, in a way, shall we say, sounded like or was close to the idea of music that we have created, we called it music. All I'm saying is this, I'm celebrating this construction. I'm saying it's fascinating that the human being has actually created this idea. So your observer, the observer, to my point, is the determinant of the idea of art in nature.
Biodiverse make nice.
Sorry?
Biodiverse. Birds.
Birds?
Yeah, some of the birds they make like the females compare the nest and then choose the partner. So
You're telling me they look at the prettiness of the nest and decide?
yeah, also.
Well, that is again, that's a construction you're making.
Okay, so
No, all I'm saying is that this construction that you're making of prettiness of the nest or the organ, it could be very simple. Can I tell you? As far as the bird is concerned, it could be security.
yeah.
It looks at the nest, it sees the weave is not secure enough for the eggs. It decides that this nest is not working. Now, you have decided that certain kind of weave is beautiful, certain is not. You're looking at geometry, you're looking at formation, you're looking at arithmetic, you're looking at all these things, right? And you are saying this is beautiful, that is not beautiful. That is also comes from where you come from. Your judgment, your position, which is why you may find one nest beautiful, I may not find it beautiful. All I'm saying is this construction is our construction. The bird is calling for a mate.
How do we know what the bird was thinking?
Well, according to the ornithologist, is it? Yeah. Okay. The ornithologists, they have defined different calls for different reasons, and I'm just following, I believe them a bit. So I'm just following what they say. So they have categorized calls for, various things. And so there are some birds whose calls we don't call beautiful. On what judgment did you say it was not beautiful? Because the idea of sonic beauty comes from our idea of music, and it is culturally defined too. For example, people in the West may find some birds' calls very beautiful that you and I may find awful, simply because we have worked on a melodic idea of music and they worked on a harmonic. Our ears listen to it differently. Okay, or Africa, or different cultures. So all I'm saying is that I mean, Oscar Wilde probably said it most interestingly in one of his beautiful essays. He said, nature imitates art. Art doesn't imitate nature. I thought that's one of the most fascinating statements anybody has made. And his explanation is even more interesting. So he goes on to say in the essay that there are, there's a frog. I think his analogy was frog. I'm sure you can find the essay online. He says, suppose there's a kind of frog that's there next to your pond every day. You would have never noticed it in your life. I paint it, or the painter paints it, and then you notice it. You never knew that frog existed. So in terms of the observer, you have imitated the art rather than nature the opposite way. It's an interesting take to it, and I think it's an important point that he makes, that the artist, in a way, tells you what there is in an artistic fashion, of course, so therefore nature doesn't imitate art. I mean, art doesn't imitate nature, but nature is actually imitating art because it allows you to observe it, and you're part of nature. So it's a flip on what is traditionally believed to be the observer and the observed idea. And I think it's close to the idea that art is defined by the human being, by the human being.
No, I have to disagree, because animals also they prefer more beautiful stuff. Right?
What? Who?
Okay, take a female lion or something. It will prefer a stronger, nicely built male.
Stronger, nicely built male is not equal to a beautiful art piece. Come on.
Beauty is
Yeah, go ahead.
so definition of beauty should come from how you build it.
No, so the definition of that beauty comes from misogyny in life. Wait, let me get there. It comes from the human being's need, okay, of the idea of the male, okay. So it's possible that you got it from observing people around. That may be, but we are talking about art here, okay.
So you are defining beauty in terms of human thinking.
Of course, it is based on human thinking.
Yeah, but
That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying you are deciding that that's beautiful. See, when the animal makes these choices, biological choices, it makes it on reasons that work for progeny. When they want a stronger male, they're hoping that they'll have better progeny. Okay? Now that is very different from you making an artistic idea of it. This is an observation of the human being. This is a creation of the human being. So whether it is sound, whether it is visual, or whether it is thing, it is you have defined, you are looking at, you're the observer. First accept that you are the observer. You are looking at it and defining it in a certain mode. Okay? Now, you could take the deeply biological route of explaining art. There is also that whole theorization that looks at the fact that most of these artistic ideas come from the idea of human biology, existence, progeny, all these aspects, and they come from the nuts and bolts that happen within the biology, the DNA, genetics, all that. One can argue that scientifically also, but the only problem for me in taking that route completely is it never explains experience. And my interest is in experience, not in telling me how. Okay? So I'm more interested in how the experience of art is the whole way of relationship and process. And even if you take the biological route, it still does not tell you why that experience happens to you. You can tell me certain hormones are triggered, you're telling me why again. But the experience still exists. Now, there's a classic example of so many scientists who work on certain odd behaviors that happen to human mind, But even after they understand it, they still experience it exactly the same way they knew it even before they knew the science of it. That's the most fascinating part. The experience doesn't diminish because you know how something is structured. So my only argument is that the idea of art in nature is defined from the human being's observance of it. Now, natural selection of what it happens cannot be defined on the basis of beauty. Don't tell me that it's done because something is beautiful. So you will say, what you consider ugly in nature does not find partners, or is not able to have progeny. It's not true. It is not true. So it is not just purely on the basis of what you observe as art. I'm just saying that. Can we break now?
Beauty itself is subject.
Yeah, aesthetics beauty is coming in the next 15 minutes.
Yeah. So just an announcement. Right before